I feel like I should ask you what you call your outside linebackers in the nickel.
God, why'd you get them all riled up, man?
I actually did that. I look like an idiot. That's on me.
Well, I mean, it is, just from a football 101 standpoint, it is, if teams are 4-3 teams, they're 4 down or they're 4 down. When you're a 3-4 team, you obviously have 3 true defensive linemen in the game and 2 outside backers. But as soon as you go from base 3-4 to a nickel defense, Rashawn and Preston and the rest of that room, they turn into defensive ends and are just, they're D linemen,
So thanks for the review.
Yeah.
So I am curious. What I was trying to get at, what I was trying to understand was there were some plays where those guys, whatever we're calling them, are really wide, and you got the 2 down hands in the dirt in the middle of the line, defensive lineman there. I'm wondering what's the reasoning behind it, and what are the pros and maybe some of the cons? Because a couple of times it looked like they kind of got you when they were like that.
No, I mean, they did, and it was, we gave up 3 explosive runs that were anytime that you have a game, guys, and we had 3 defensive penalties and 3 explosive runs. And when you play, we have a young group of defensive guys, and we talk to them every week that most of the time, now there's blowout games, but 80% of the time when you play an NFL football game, it's going to be a 2, 3, 4 point game, and those are what we've been in, and that's usually going to come down to 5 or 6 plays. And when you have 3 defensive penalties that kept drives going on 3rd down, when you give up 3 explosive runs, a 24-yard run, a 20-yard run, a 16-yard run, it's usually not going to be good, and that really is what it comes down to. 60 minutes later in a football game, when it is a close game, when it is a tight game, you usually can draw back to 5, 6, 7 plays individually that really affected the game, and those 6 plays did.
Joe, the Chargers may have a totally different game plan and may not want to run the ball, but I assume you still had to address the things in the run defense. So
Sure.
How did you approach it this week in terms of just fixing it?
Well, when you make a call, you got a 50-50 chance that it's going to be run or pass. So, we talk about all the time whether you're in split safety defense, where when you're in split safety defense and they do choose to run the ball, you're a safety short in the run fit. You have to defend the run with truly your front. The thing that was disappointing about those explosive runs that we gave up, we were in what we refer to as solo gap defense, meaning we're bringing a safety to the party. We're bringing a safety down. And when an offense is in a 1-back formation, to the tight end side, there's 4 gaps you have to defend. Away from the tight end side, there's 3 gaps. So there's 7 gaps that you have to defend. Well, if you have 4 down linemen, 2 inside backers, and a safety down, you have 7 men for 7 gaps. And that was the thing that was, that was a bummer, that on those explosive runs we were in, we were gapped out, as we call it. And whether we missed tackles, we missed, we had the most missed tackles of any game last Sunday. So that's a bad combination. So, Rob, I don't know if I answered that, but
How many of the missed tackles were in the run game? I know there was one on the 24-yarder, or the 20-yarder that could have been at the line.
On all the explosives, there were was missed tackle and multiple missed tackles. That was the thing that was, and in this league, that's usually, especially in the run game, when you talk about explosive runs, a high percentage of the time it's usually missed tackles.
So those guys, they go 3 wides almost all the time. What goes into the decision whether to match with nickel or to still on early downs, or like 1st and 10,
Sure.
or whether to play base to stop the run?
Yeah, I mean, great question. That's kind of the cat and mouse that at least we go through from a defensive side of the ball, is that you gotta, when they do go 11 personnel, which most teams in this day and age, even on early downs, it's an 11 personnel league, but you have to decide, okay, are you gonna go nickel versus that? Are you gonna go base? Are you gonna go what we call penny, which is 5 down with 5 DBs? So those are all the things that obviously go into the game planning. And, with today's football, when you choose to go a certain personnel group on the field, if an offense chooses to go tempo then and not allow you to substitute, you gotta, realize that you're gonna be stuck with that personnel group on the field. So, but those are always things that go into the ongoing game plan every week.
Do you feel like you were, looking back, were you okay there, especially early in the game? If you had to do it over, would you go more penny or base?
We always try to mix, we always have the ability and we always have that. If you go back on early downs, even in that game, we chose to go base versus 11 a handful of times. I firmly believe that, when you are in nickel and you're in solo gap defense, you should be able to stop the run, but you still got to get off blocks. You still, got to keep your feet. You still have to, when an opportunity comes about, you have to tackle, and those were, I've talked to you guys and mentioned many times before, especially specifically in the run game, consistency. And we had consistently played the run fairly well a couple weeks in a row. And, like I said, if you give up 3 explosive runs in a game from a consistent standpoint, you're not doing it. And we fell short of that on Sunday.
We'll see what Rudy's status is this week, but what went into starting Jonathan over Anthony Johnson? I know both of them played pretty well against the Rams. What went into that decision there?
J.O.'s been our starter since Sav went out, and then Rudy, when he was down, that's when Anthony started the L.A. game. So, just kind of that's the rhythm that we've gone with. And we'll see what happens this week.
I'm sure you've had quite a few rookie corners over the years. What stands out about Carrington, especially as a late round guy who seems to be pretty competitive?
That's probably it. I think the thing with Carrington that's been neat, just kind of watching his progression since he got here as a late round draft pick guy, is his competitive nature. Is that he really takes tackling and physicality. I think it took him a minute to figure that out, especially even when we were in OTA practices and training camp. Just the difference of it at this level. And he's really made a conscious effort of really working on that. And, because in this league, you got to, especially at corner, you got to do it all. You got to, you got to cover, you got to play man, you got to play zone, you got to crack, replace, and tackle in the run game. So, and that's always the thing that you look for, especially with young players, is just the daily, weekly improvement. And, I still think he's continuing to improve. But he's taken advantage of his opportunities as well.
What do you think was the difference between those previous 2 games where the run defense picked up and this last one? And did you play downhill any less in this last game? Any less run blitzes, for instance?
No, I mean, no. I mean, if you look at as far as the calls and the style, no, I wouldn't say there was really any difference from a philosophical play calling standpoint. It was just, like I said, I mean, that's what keeps us up late at night, is that when you are stacking blocks and you are playing well and you stack a couple games together where you play really well, whether collectively or in a certain area, We had played the run pretty good for 2 weeks, and then, you know, I would have never guessed that from a tackling standpoint. I never would have guessed that we would have. There was no signs of that I was concerned with going into the game. So, but you know, you go back to the drawing board, you go back to individual, you go back to practice, and you continue to stress and work on the fundamentals, because this is defense ultimately is about tackling the man with the ball and getting the guy that has the ball down. And we unfortunately, we missed way too many tackles last week.
Joe, I asked Bisaccia the same thing. Is Kelly the first player that you've perhaps held as a baby and now coached in your career?
Yeah, I remember when Brian had Caillou, I don't remember if I ever held him as an infant, but it is kind of a cool story. Obviously followed, Caillou going through college, and Brian and I still talk. Brian and I was actually a GA. I had got done playing at SC and was a GA at SC when we signed Brian. So I was a GA at SC when Brian was a freshman. And then I kind of worked my way through, and then, years later, I end up at Tampa Bay, and we were together in Tampa for 6 years, won a Super Bowl together. So, the Brian Kelly history that I have is long, and he's an incredible. It's funny when Caillou walked in, I hadn't seen him in since he was a kid, and it looked like, oh my God, I'm staring at BK. So it's neat. It's Brian texts me and goes like, what a full circle moment, and it really is. So we're excited about the kid. So we got him in here. He got 2 days of practice in yesterday and today, and we'll get him going.
Joe, was that the first father-son that you would have coached?
Yeah, I'm not that old, so I don't. I was actually, my wife was asking me about that. I think it is. I think you always hear stories about that. And you always think, you're like, wow, that coach must be, he must be really old if he's, coaching kids of guys that he coached. So yeah, I'm almost positive. I think it's the first time I've ever experienced that. So great family. Caillou's a great kid. So we're excited we have him.
Joey?
Keenan Allen's going to catch a bunch of balls. He does every game. But what's the difference when he has 18 for, 215 or 11 for 175 or whatever? What's the difference? What are they doing?
Yeah. Well, they're targeting him and they're throwing the ball. It's amazing when you look at. I think Keenan's got like 103 targets and 75 catches. And I know from a reception standpoint, I think the guy currently, now they have some guys out. They have Williams out, they have Palmer out, but I think Keenan is leading their team with either 73 or 75 catches, and I think the guy that's second is Eckler with like 23. So it's insane. I was at the Chargers when we drafted Keenan, so I got a little bit of a brief background with him, and he's been doing it at a high level for a long time, and just a special player. I use that word with you guys all the time about consistency. I don't know if there's been over the last, Keenan's 11th year. I don't know if there's been a more consistent receiver in the National Football League than Keenan year in and year out. And that's the thing that's crazy, is that they target him, they go to him, the ball's going to him, and he's one of those guys that, finds a way to get open, and Justin does a great job of getting the ball to him.
Last one, please. Joe, I know you have faith in CB and CB, but how different is your defense when you have Jaire? He obviously played well against the Rams, and has been frustrating, kind of not knowing week to week whether you're going to have him.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's frustrating for us. It's even more frustrating for Ja, because the type of competitor he is, he wants to be out there. And of course, it would be, I love what CB and CV have been able to do. I love that they're getting an opportunity and taking advantage of it. But, you know, when you have a Jaire Alexander and you have a Darnell Savage and you have an Eric Stokes out of your secondary, yeah, it's very frustrating. But, you know, like we talk all the time, when we break the huddle, those are our 11. They got a job to do, and hopefully we'll get all those guys back at some point, and we'll be all together, get the band back together again. But you know, you can't worry about that. You just gotta hope that it's sooner rather than later. But yeah, of course, it's frustrating.
Did you see enough of him today to at least have some hope and encouragement?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that a guy, you know, has been injured and been out and is able to do anything in practice, that's a good sign. So to have him out there today was great. And then, you know, hopefully we'll walk in here tomorrow. It's always, you know, when a guy's been banged up and a guy's been out, he goes and practices. At least my mindset is always, you're keeping your fingers crossed that when he comes in the next day that he still feels good and doesn't have a setback. So, but yeah, of course, it was great to have him out there today.